I'm children's book author Deborah Diesen, and I have a book to share with you. It's called Equality's Call. This story can be enjoyed by kids as young as preschool. It's a relatively short book, and it's written in rhyme and has a recurring refrain. And so even a very young person can enjoy hearing this, but it also has content that's appropriate for older students. So if you're in elementary school or even older, there are things you can learn from this book, from the main story as well as the back matter. And even grown-ups might learn a thing or two. I know I learned a lot while I was writing it, so there might be something you can learn whatever your age. It is a non-fiction book. Books come in fiction or non-fiction. This is non-fiction. It tells a true story of something that really happened. Whenever I read a story, whether I'm reading it to other people or just to myself, the first place I always go in the book is the title page. And the title page is the part of the book that tells you the book's title, and in this case it says Equality's Call, the story of voting rights in America. It also tells you about the people who made the book. There are two people who made this book. One of them is the author. It says here, written by Deborah Diesen. It's me, I'm the author. Then it says illustrated by Magdalena Mora. She did the art for this book. She's the artist, the illustrator, and the illustrations she did for this book are amazing, and I know you'll enjoy them. I'm going to get started reading the story. You may find as I read it aloud, especially when I come to the refrain, that you can anticipate some of the things that you're going to be hearing. And if that's the case, it's okay to chime in. I like that when I'm reading a story, to have people help me out. So you can go ahead and help me out. And if you listen to it for a second time or a third time, you might start to know most of it. That's the interesting thing about stories written in rhyme. You can carry them around in your head pretty well. Our founders declared when our country began that consent of the governed was part of the plan. Through voting, elections, and representation, the voice of the people would strengthen our nation. In fact, though, for years this great founding ideal was extended to some, and for others not real. But we heard in the distance equality's call. A right isn't right till it's granted to all. The state set the rules about who got to vote, and your gender, your race, and your wealth were of note. White men with property went to the polls, but the rest of the people were left off the rolls. The dream of democracy wasn't yet true. There were changes to make. There was work still to do. But we heard growing clear equality's call. A right isn't right till it's granted to all. The rules about wealth were the first thing to go. As more were enfranchised, their voices could grow. And a small group of voices was raising the fact that enslavement was wrong, an unspeakable act. Good people stood up for the truth that they knew. Abolition and suffrage were long overdue. We heard ever louder equality's call. A right isn't right till it's granted to all. There was war in our nation, and slavery ended. Amendments were added, the franchise extended. Now more men could vote, at least so the law said, yet denial through taxes and tests was widespread. And the voices of women were mostly omitted. In only some states was their voting permitted. But nothing could muffle equality's call. A right isn't right till it's granted to all. Suffragists didn't give up on the fight, and the 19th Amendment gave women the right. But voters of color still met with oppression. Their voting was hindered by brutal suppression. So we passed legislation to make voting fair, to extend and protect voters' rights everywhere. We heard it, we felt it, equality's call. A right isn't right till it's granted to all. The journey's not over, the work hasn't ended. Democracy's dream must be constantly tended. But where we are now is a debt that we owe to the work of more people than ever will know. And each time we vote, we acknowledge that past. We honor our rights to ensure they will last. For to vote is to answer equality's call, and each time we vote with them all. And I'm going to see if I can do a little bit of a close-up here. So you can see that nice last spread. I learned a lot in writing this book, and I hope that you will use this book to learn more about voting rights as well. The back of the book includes a spread about voting-related amendments and legislation. And it also has a section on voting rights activists. These are just a few of the many people who have stood up for the right to vote over the years. There are three things that I think are really important that I hope you will think about as expectations. One is an expectation that I think we should all have of ourselves, and that I hope you have of yourself. Even as a young person who can't vote yet, I want you to expect yourself to be a voter, because voting is important. I mean, think of all the people who have worked so hard to make sure that we have the right to vote. The second expectation I would like you to have is of your government. And voting is very important, so your government should make it fair and accessible and easy and convenient, and that's something you should expect. The third expectation is an expectation not only of yourself, but of all the people around you, all the other people in your country. If something is wrong, whether it's about voting rights or anything else, you should expect yourself and the others around you to take responsibility for that and to speak up if something needs changing. I have a couple of ideas about ways that you can use this book to learn more about voting rights. I have 5 that I wrote down. I want to make sure I tell you all 5 of them. One idea I have for a way that you can expand what you know about voting rights is to pick a word that you heard in this book that you weren't entirely sure what it meant. And then go ahead and look it up, find the definition. But don't just look it up, explore the word. Look at the context, look at the history, learn more. Curiosity and asking questions is what will make you smarter. And questions I think of as like jumping jacks for your brain. They make you smarter and stronger, and sometimes even if you don't get the answer to the question, you still learn. Another idea is to think about one of those historical moments that was mentioned in the book and learn more about that. Go back and dig around in the history, read other books, explore, ask questions. You can also learn more by picking a voting rights activist to learn more about. And in addition to the many who are listed here, you can find lists online and explore those names and learn more about one. And when you learn more about one, you'll run into some other names and learn more about them. A fourth way you can learn more about voting rights is to learn about current voting rights in your own state and how they compare to the way voting is done in other states. There are similarities between states and there are differences. And that's something, as you explore, you can ask, why do those differences exist? Should they exist? What are ways we can address possible barriers to voting? And finally, the fifth way that I thought of for you to learn more about voting rights is to just reflect on what you heard in this story and some of the other things that you've been thinking about. Pick one aspect that you're personally very interested in, and then just learn more. That's how I came to write this book. If you ask questions and look for the answers, and then think about what you've learned, and think about ways to apply it to your own life and to the lives around you, that's really what knowledge and learning are for. I thank you for listening to this book. I hope you enjoyed it, and I look forward to reading to you again soon.